Welcome back. Today we're going deep into chapter 21, and Jesus is going to talk about the heart and giving and generosity and difficult times, end times, and how to live, faithful and ready lives. So, what does God really value? That's the question. And also, why does the world feel unsteady and unstable sometimes? And how do we stay strong in our faith despite that? So that's what this chapter is really going to dive into. So in the first section, we have the widow's offering, and Jesus sees all of the people, who have giving large amounts of money. And then he notices a poor widow who gives 2 small coins. So the widows were among the most vulnerable people in society. Often they just had very little income. If they didn't have a man, a husband, a son to care for them, it would be a very destitute situation. And so Jesus says she's given more than all the others, even though it was just a few coins. Why? Because others gave out of their abundance, but she gave out of poverty, and she gave out of her dependence, out of her trust. God measures, he measures things by our heart, right? By our sacrifice, by our dependence, by our trust, not by the amount. He cares about our heart. We've been talking about that forever now. And it's not about how much you give, it's about your heart. So he goes on to talk about how the temple is going to be destroyed, and the disciples, are looking at the temple and they're like, it's beautiful. The beauty of the temple was magnificent. And the temple in Jerusalem was massive. It was impressive. It was the central focus of the Jewish religion, Jewish life. Because the religion poured into their life. And Jesus says, no stone will be left unturned. It will be completely destroyed. Because even the most, beautiful, impressive structures made by human hands will be destroyed. God is eternal, and he is the only one. Now we have a wall if you go to Jerusalem. Nothing lasted. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD by Caesar Tiberius Caesar, I guess. And, the disciples ask, when is this going to happen? And he talks about end times, and he talks about wars and rumors of wars and natural disasters and persecution of believers. And, these aren't just signs. Here's the thing. These are not just signs of the end. They are a part of a broken world. That's what people get confused on. They think, there's been wars and rumors of wars. Yeah. Here's the thing when it comes to end time prophecy. Every generation and every century, every millennia has believed their time would be the end times. People during World War I, the Great War is what it was called. And the rumors of wars, the Spanish plague, all of those things were happening. And are these the end times Jesus talks about? Yes. Sounds like it. World War II, yes. Now here we are. Are these the end times? Possibly, yes. There's, and we could talk about this stuff all day long, but there are, one of the things that we have to realize is that it's when Jesus is talking, yes, he's speaking about end times prophecy, and he's here in particular, he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about. And, at this point, Christians and Jews were being persecuted. There was major persecution for his name's sake as well. And he says in verse 20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So specifically here, he is both talking about the end of times and the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in their lifetime. Well, actually, most of them were gone, but John was still alive. He was the only one. And so he then goes to talk about in verse 25 the coming of the Son of Man. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, distress of nations and perplexity, people fainting with fear and foreboding. They will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawn near. Now, I am of the belief and the position that Jesus will come and rescue, take up his church before the tribulation. That is what church history, or church that is calls the rapture. This is one of the verses that I think kind of goes along with that a little bit. They will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. We will, in Thessalonians, it talks about we will meet Jesus in the clouds. Now, this also can be talking about when Jesus comes for the war of Armageddon and his second coming. I know this all sounds kind of confusing, but mostly I think what we need to focus on is that wars, rumors of wars, pestilence, persecution have always been. That's part of a broken system that only God can restore. And we are not called to think about the end times. That's just not, that's God's thing. That's his plan and his purpose, and the timing of that, the when, the how. We don't need to worry about it because God's got it. I mean, if he sent Jesus at the perfect timing in history, he's going to come back in the perfect time in history. And that's all we need to trust. In the meantime, we got to make sure that people are not going to hell, that people are going to say that we are living a life purposed for the kingdom. So then after that, Jesus talks about the lesson of the fig tree, and he looks at the fig trees, and he says, so when you see things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. The generation will not pass away until all has taken place. Like I was saying, like it's heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. We got to know what his word says. If his words are the only thing that's never going to pass away, we've got to know what his word says. This is why we're in our Bibles every single day. This is why what we're doing today here, reading one chapter, is so important, because the world will be destroyed. It is being destroyed. But Jesus' word, his words, they'll never be destroyed. They'll never, go waste away. God is both loving and patient. He is just and he is righteous. And his word is true, and it will be fulfilled. Everything has been fulfilled, and the things that haven't been, they will be fulfilled. So, let's see, what's next? We kind of went through all that stuff. Okay. His words. All right. So stay watchful. See, Jesus says in the end, he ends with a warning. He says, be careful and be on the watch. We get distracted really easily by the things of the world, by pleasure. We've got to be spiritually alert. We've got to be ready. We've got to be ready. We've got to be living with eternal awareness. We've got to be living with eternal purpose. We have to stay focused and stay ready to keep our heart close to God. Because what happens in distractions and the things will pull us away, and we can't be pulled away. We don't have time for that. God values our heart more than our resources, right? And even though the world may seem extremely unstable, and I know it does right now, but he's in control. And the best news is Jesus is coming back. He's coming back for his church. He's coming back for you and I. And we don't have to be afraid of the future. We have to trust God and stay faithful and live ready. Live ready. We don't need to be looking up into the sky waiting. But we need to put our heads down and do the work that he's called us to. God is present and he is faithful, and we must do the same.